You're watching the Autos 360 Network.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rick Walker, host of the SST Car Show. You are watching SST Live Sunday Night. And this evening, we do have a special guest, Brenden Kennedy, who is going to join us to talk about electric cars, because the debate over electric cars continues to rage. So stick with us, because Brenden is up next. Welcome, friends, to the SST Car Show Sunday Night Live show. And tonight we are speaking with Brenden Kennedy. And tonight's special topic is electric cars, because if you haven't noticed, there's a big push on with every auto company in the marketplace to go electric. And it seems like every auto company is embracing this move. Every government around the world seems to be embracing this. And it seems like we're getting electric cars whether we like it or not. The question is, Brenden, is this the right thing to do? And are these electric cars truly green?
Well, first off, thank you very much for having me on the show. I did kind of want to say, too, like, that there is somewhat of purpose for electric vehicles. I just don't think that we are ready for the big push for them. Are they truly green? That is, in fact, a lie. And it has been a lie since day one. I have some examples that we could discuss in that regard, but I'm not sure if you wanted to start off with the flow of something else. But first off, I guess we could discuss would be what type of minerals and resources go into the creation of lithium batteries that are required for these vehicles.
Right. Well, I guess, first of all, too, we should tell people that you have your own podcast and you explore a lot of social issues, environmental issues, issues of the day, news. Tell us, first of all, about your podcast and how people can find you over there.
Okay, you can find us at on Facebook. We are The Flow of Discourse. Me and co-host Christopher Baugh, we both go into different aspects of social issues, government controversies, that type of things. One of the very things that we talk about kind of frequently too is the big push for everything to go green and environmental, and some of the nuances that are involved in that, and some of those things are a bit of a lie. We can be found on Spotify. You can listen to us there. We could also be found on Podbean, and we do have an episode or two up on YouTube. So feel free to check us out. And there's going to be some more stuff coming out soon.
Cool. So, in electric cars, I hear a lot of things said about electric cars, and I see journalists publishing a lot of information about electric cars, and a lot of it is just plain wrong. Just last week, I saw a journalist refer to electric cars as fuel-free. And I often hear the phrase emissions-free. What's your take on phrases and terminology like that? Obviously, if you're running a gasoline-powered car, there are emissions coming straight from the tailpipe. Are those kinds of claims, fuel-free, emissions-free, are those accurate? Because I don't think they are at all.
No, they wouldn't be accurate, because the electricity that you're going to use to power that is coming from somewhere. So it depends on where you live, but it could very well be you live in a region in the United States that they have a coal electric generating factory. It could come from uh, gasoline or natural gas powered factories. It can come from um, many different things. There's also hydro, which I would say is not as impactful, but it does have an impact on the environment, such as different water ecosystems. So it could disrupt fish and salmon and that sort of thing. You could never be too sure. You're also thinking about the big trucks at the mines that are used to extract everything that goes into the car. A lot of these are going to be enormous vehicles that take a lot of fossil fuels. I guess we could go even deeper. A lot of cars today are simply made of plastic. Those plastics can, or those plastics are all created with petroleum byproducts and that sort of thing. So to say that they are fuel free, that's just a buzzword that they're using, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of it is government sponsored. I know in Canada there's a huge amount of journalists that are kind of subsidized by the government, and that may incentivize them to go with government narratives as opposed to going in with a free mind or going in to look at the truth of the buzzwords that are being thrown around.
Well, I should start by saying I'm not against electric cars.
Mm-hmm.
I just want information to be accurate. I want the public to get accurate information. I also think that, well, I just think it's important to be truthful about these things because public policy is developed from information that is distributed through the public, and public attitude is then formed based on the information that we're getting through the media. And then it goes back to government again, because that's what the public ends up demanding. But using phrases like fuel free, emissions free, and even auto companies saying that they're going to be, net zero by such and such a date. It's somewhat misleading because for an auto company or any company to get to net zero, which means they're just totally sustainable, they have no emissions, they are an emissions free company essentially. What they're really doing is they're buying carbon credits. And they're buying and selling carbon credits so that if they're producing emissions, they offset some of those by planting trees, or they buy carbon credits from other companies that have excess carbon credits, or from government. So they're basically paying. It's a form of taxation.
It's a big form of taxation. I know in the United States that gasoline does have sort of like an environmental tax. This past August, the Biden administration has pushed through a bill that will allow them to start investigating or start a pilot program, if you will, for taxation of mileage. And they are kind of hinting at that they may get rid of the gasoline tax if that is the case. And so it's going to beg me to wonder if they're just going to apply this tax to people with electric vehicles, or is this something that they are planning to do so that they could continue to tax electric vehicles anyway after you've already paid for this? It's up for debate. There's some privacy issues that I have had with what I've read, because it's indicating that they're going to use GPS and data tracker apps to kind of determine how much you drove for an entire year, and then they're going to put that on your tax. So it's going to affect how people drive every year. So you could expect a possible $2,000 extra on your taxes if you live in a rural area. It could be much more. It's all in the working stages right now. So we're not going to see the effects of that, but there's a lot that's left unsaid. And usually when governments make these types of mandates with a lot of missing information, you could kind of expect some sort of nefarious or open policy, if you will, where it could be like, well, it doesn't matter, we'll just tax you whatever we want. And
Very interesting that you bring that up, because electric cars are going to have a huge impact on the way we live, the way we drive, the way we get around. And when I say that, I mean the impact will be much more, run much deeper than just in how you drive. It became very apparent to me this year when I had a couple of electric vehicles to test drive as part of our SST car show test drive program. When I was charging these things up, I realized that there will be apps. There are apps that you're using that are connected to yourself on your cell phone that you then sync to the car.
Yeah.
The car then becomes aware of everything that you're doing. It becomes an extension of you. It then carries all this information about you. Your car then knows every movie you've watched. It knows where you've gone. The government can track you. Companies can track you. You're quite right. They will know exactly how much energy you've consumed with your vehicle. And if we're going to some sort of a social credit program, as they have in China, they're going to track you. They're going to know whether you've driven too much or too little. If they don't like how much you've driven, they're gonna tax you. They could, if they don't like what you're doing, they could just shut your car off.
I think that is something that they already have technology implemented for with vehicles. I do know that there is anti-theft programs, and what they will do is they have the capacity to already shut the car off, but it's a specific program that needs to be installed on your car, and oftentimes it's not something that anybody normally has on their car when they first buy it. It's like an aftermarket program, but what would be to stop them to implement that on every new vehicle sale? It's no different than rear view cameras being installed. I think in Canada they said like all certain X amount of model year vehicles has to have rear view camera installed on it. And they kind of make it sound, oh, it won't cost you a dime, but it does at the end of the day, because they're just going to pass that expense on to the consumer.
Right. Well, I mean, I am impressed, I have to say, with the way technology has progressed in a very short period of time over the last even 5 to 10 years. Just a few years ago, these electric cars had a range. I remember the first Chevy Volt that I drove. It really only drove about 30, 40 kilometers on a single charge. Hybrids, only about 30 or 40 kilometers on all electric. Then the gasoline engine kicks in. But now we have range in excess of 300, 400 kilometers on cars that are affordable. So that is pretty impressive. And the acceleration is there. The performance is there. They accelerate faster than gasoline powered cars. So that's pretty impressive stuff.
Cars are a lot like tools, I find. So every tool has a certain job, and that goes for cars too. They're not all made for moving you from point A to point B. Like some of them are more designed for intercity travel. I think that there is a purpose for electric cars, and that the market would be entirely capable of deciding who's going to have one and why they want to use it. And sure, they could advertise, well, you don't have to pay for gasoline anymore, and that could be considered in one way or another a much greener strategy. But I don't think where we're at right now with electric vehicles, that I don't think we're in a state to start talking about, oh, well, we must implement green technology across the board, and anybody who doesn't comply, then we're going to start making gasoline and anything vehicle related taxable or what have you. I think that we're going to see something like that before long, though. Politicians and that sort of thing seem to think that we could just go green right now, and I don't think that's the case. It really is not the case. With Tesla, though, I just wanted to say this. With Tesla, we are seeing battery capacity with a range of like 700 kilometers or miles or something. And that's pretty impressive. That could go a long ways.
Well,
But
Canada is banning gasoline-powered cars by 2035. So we don't have much time left.
do you think we'll be there? Do you think we'll be ready for it?
I don't know. I'm very skeptical because when I think of the infrastructure that needs to be improved in terms of hydroelectric lines, the charging stations that still have to be installed, maybe I just don't think big enough.
Okay.
But it seems to me that the only way to produce enough electricity to power if you convert all of the cars on the road, or even half of them to electric, it's nuclear. You're not going to do it with wind. You're not going to be able to do it with solar in Canada. We've tapped out all of the real major hydroelectric opportunities, I think, in the country. So it really only leaves nuclear as the only viable option to generate enough electricity, and then you need the infrastructure to deliver it. We don't have it now, so that has to be all built out. And I can see football fields and of just charging stations along highways, unless they come up with other systems where people then have to sit for half an hour or an hour to rapid charge their vehicles. But the technology may improve considerably between now and 2035, as it has over the past 5 to 10 years. It will need to, if that's really where we're going to end up.
It will need to. And I guess to play somewhat of a devil's advocate here, when it comes to the electric car, there's far less moving parts required than the gasoline engine. But I think that there could be something to be said about the usefulness of and how powerful gasoline engines can be, and how tried and tested they are. And just like fuel or range on electric batteries is, fuel economy could also improve.
Oh, here's Liz. Liz Valley says, would it even be possible to do all of this without dealing with rolling blackouts and issues like it? What do you think?
So I did some research here before going on this call with you, and one thing I found is that just like you pointed out, there is a lot of terrible reporting going on around this. And with that, they said it's a lie, it's a myth on this website. And then I thought to myself, well, California can't sustain powering everybody's air conditioning without rolling blackouts occurring. How do they expect this to happen? So I think that there is probably going to need to be a lot of things that are improved with that, because if they can't handle air conditioning in the summertime, how are they going to handle every single person who owns a vehicle plugging in? And I would also wager to say that sounds like a pretty good excuse to take away off-peak hours. So in Ontario, we have off-peak hours, usually from 7 to 7 at night. But everybody's going to be plugging in their cars at this time. And so they're going to be like, well, everybody's using electricity at this time, so we're going to have to take that away.
And I think we'll end up paying a lot more for electricity because of increased demand, and the cost of generating it, I think it will increase as well.
Yeah. If you look at the Ontario Green Energy Program that the Ontario government tried to implement previously, it ended up causing many people's hydro to skyrocket, and there's quite a bit of trouble with how that was going. And so if they start tagging on infrastructure improvement programs, then we're going to be into looking at more of the same.
So I'm just looking up here what the percentage of electric vehicles on the road, what that percentage is right now today. And I still don't think it's very high.
No.
And as I'm looking it up here, I think you're looking at about 5 to 6% in some of the, areas that have embraced electric cars a little bit more readily.
Yeah.
That's not much.
No, I was going to say between 5 and 10. It is going to improve, and it's kind of like we said earlier. The purpose for this type of vehicle is to get you around in a city, but think about the inconvenience in your life. It's one thing to gas up and go within 5 minutes, but then think about sitting there at the electric charging station for an hour. If your vehicle is older, you're going to lose 10% effectiveness on the battery over time. I think every 5,000 full charges, you're going to lose 10% battery life, so on and so forth.
And in cold weather, they're less efficient. You need to use some electricity to generate heat inside the vehicle.
That was one of the things I looked up. And just like we were talking about with propaganda, that was the biggest one I'd seen. So I'd read a couple of articles, notably CanadianAutoDealer.ca. So they basically put it like, it's a myth that your electric vehicle won't operate properly in cold weather. They'll be able to excel just fine. And then kind of, if you read between the lines a little bit, it says you could expect to lose 40 to 50% of your charge time in cold weather. 40 to 50%. So if your car has a 400-kilometer range and it's -20 outside, you're only going to be able to go 200 kilometers.
And we're saying a lot of negative things about electric cars so far, not saying too much positive, but it doesn't seem to me like any of this is really being market driven. It's all being driven by government policy, the environmental movement. So it's not being driven by consumers. When people go to buy a car today, as you've seen, only in the best areas, 5 to 6% adoption of electric vehicles.
Yeah.
So 95% or more of the people out there are still buying gasoline powered vehicles.
That's incredible. I guess you could say that would be my biggest gripe with the whole thing, that this is not market driven. The entire system is incentivized. So they're taking basically everybody's money that they make, and whether you want it or not, this is how it's going to be, and yada, yada, yada.
And
so,
it is, in fact, these, if you really think about it, and this is something that bothered me when I had some of these test vehicles. In some cases, I was charging these things up for free, because the government had free charging stations as a way to incentivize people to buy electric vehicles, and they still weren't buying them. But I honestly, I've charged up every electric vehicle I've had, mostly, except for the last one, the Ford Mach-E. I had to stop at a rapid charger and pay for that. But other than that, I was charging it up for nothing. So as I thought about it, I thought this is incredibly unfair. It's incredibly unjust. It's a form of regressive taxation, because that electricity is being subsidized or paid for by taxpayers. And that means that the single mom working 3 jobs, working at Tim Hortons, McDonald's, and Burger King to support her kids, is paying income tax to subsidize the electricity that I was charging up that, $60, $70, $80,000 vehicle with. And then if you think about it even further, every step of the production of that vehicle and every step of the sale of that, subsidized. The parts are subsidized. The factory it was produced in was subsidized. Every auto company gets government grants and subsidies to produce electric vehicles. And if they don't produce electric vehicles, they're penalized. So that same single mom, her tax dollars, a portion of those are going into the production of these vehicles. And so the true sale price, when they're saying that these electric cars are now price competitive, it's a little bit misleading, because the gasoline powered vehicle is not getting the same level of subsidy.
Yeah.
And yet they're being priced comparably, right? It kind of fries my brain when I think about it.
No, it fries mine too. I'm actually glad that you pointed out the MSRP of that vehicle, mostly because, like, when we're talking about a vehicle that expensive, we're talking about somebody who could afford the vehicle anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this guy probably has a truck with 4-wheelers and boats, and that's what I'm not
well, that certainly was true when you were talking about buying a Tesla for $130 or $140 or $150,000 a few years ago. They've been
Yeah.
trying to produce like the Nissan Leaf, the Chevy Bolt, which they've had problems with. They
Yeah.
had to stop production again because they kept catching fire.
Yeah.
So they're trying to bring the price point down so that middle class people can afford to buy these things. But that is all being driven by government grants and subsidies at every step from production to consumption.
And I mean, those cars are fine if you are that, say, single mom who can afford like a mid-price vehicle. So the 2021 Chevrolet Bolt MSRP is starting at $44,000. That's a lie though, because you can never get the base price because the vehicles they'll have on their lot are going to have different packages and those packages. So you're probably looking like $70,000 by the time you walk out of the dealership with a brand new Chevy Bolt. But
Well, I don't know if you get that high with a Chevy Bolt. I kind of doubt you'd get up to that level. But yeah, I mean, as you add options, right, to
and
any vehicle.
taxes,
Yeah.
options and taxes, and of course you'll get a rebate on your taxes for it, but you don't pay that rebate right there. You get it at the end of the year. I mean, somebody like me, I don't think that'd be very feasible for me.
Like I have to say, and I have to be fair because when I had that Ford Mach-E, that was one of the coolest, most refined cars I have driven. It's an SUV, crossover Mustang thing. Is it a Mustang? No, but it's got the Mustang logo on it. But it is refined, and so I understand when people say that. I think Elon Musk said that people will begin to look at gasoline powered vehicles as primitive, and I understand that now. But I'm still not convinced that this is going to work.
Well, I think it's not going to matter if it works. It's just going to be pushed, and us talking about it and that sort of thing is a good thing to bring awareness and attention to that. So
well, Liz actually has another comment asking if traffic jams and freezing cold weather, will people become stranded on the highway?
Well, that's a possibility. As I'd stated earlier, you are looking at a 40 to 50% reduction in battery life in the wintertime. So your car could take you a lot less further than what you would be used to in the wintertime. So yes, that technically could be a problem. And if you think about a lot of people living in big cities that these cars are designed for, a lot of these people don't own cars anyway. A lot of the people who own cars usually live outside the city and they drive into it every day. So
well, I saw a post on Facebook from from a tow truck company.
Yeah.
And they were actually picking up a Chevy Volt, taking it to the auto wreckers to have it crushed. And it wasn't a very old vehicle, but it was because the battery was no good, and it was going to cost too much money to replace the battery. It was going to cost more than the vehicle was worth. So off it went to the shredder. And It seems to me that we're going to see a lot more of that, which means the life cycle of the vehicles, these electric vehicles, will be much shorter than a gasoline powered car, because I can go out right now and pick up $1,000 car, put some brakes on it, fix it all up, make sure it's great, right? I do this. I do it. And
of course,
I drive those things around. So you can be driving around in a 20-year-old, even a 20, I'm such a classy guy, a 25-year-old car. But we're not going to be seeing that with electric vehicles, which means it's going to make it even more difficult for people on low incomes to drive. They won't be able to afford to.
And the insurance isn't going to give you what you paid for it.
Well, they're not going to give you anything if you take it to the shredder because the battery's done, right? You don't get any insurance money for that. We might see more fraud as people set them on fire to claim insurance, but hopefully we don't see more of that, but I could see it happening.
Don't do this at home, folks. We do not recommend you set your electric vehicle on fire.
And what
But if
about
you,
the environmental aspect of this, Brendan? Because I know you've looked into this. The
yeah,
batteries are a big issue, right? Shorter range in cold weather, probably a shorter overall lifespan as
yeah,
they're frozen and thawed out repeatedly in cold temperatures. Like I can't imagine what it would be like living in northern Ontario or the Arctic trying to drive around in an electric vehicle. How much life those batteries are going to have? But what have you found? When it comes to the true environmental impact of these batteries.
well, first off, the the minerals required to build these batteries are lithium, zinc, nickel, copper, cobalt. Um, almost all of these things are being mined in and out of Africa, um, and a lot of it is done by Chinese communist corporations, which is its own kind of interesting side thing that we won't get into right now. But I'm going to share my screen here to give everybody kind of what we're looking at. So this is a pit mine, and it has cobalt and copper. And this is in the Congo. So if everybody could see that.
Okay.
So this whole area is a 111.14 kilometers square, and it's just all pit mines everywhere.
So this is strip mining, right? This is just
Yeah,
like a big pock mark, a giant crater created
yeah.
with heavy machinery.
There's a good example there. You can look this up on Google Earth yourself, and the whole area is chock full of it. Now, what they do with this is, first off, in these countries, there's little to no um, environmental policies or anything like that to protect the environment, and so they take all the mining extract and they usually dump it right next to it. And so you can see here that there's this large civilian population here, and if you look at the topography, you can see all that. So all the waste that they have from this, they just stockpile it next to the town, and it blows all the dirt and debris everywhere. The dirt and debris contains heavy metals, which if you consume them or anything like that, um, if you consume these on a regular basis, so if it's contaminating your water or anything like that, it has the ability to cause cancer, to cause miscarriages. There is in many communities in Africa also a lot of birth defects. So children being born with the enlarged craniums or born with deformed limbs. Many different examples of that sort of thing. So when that happens, here, hold up. How do I close this screen? Whoopsie.
Well, I can bring you back. You can leave it up, and we can go back
So
to it if we need to.
okay, perfect. So when you have those types of things in your environment, it can have the ability to take out all the fish species out of local lakes and rivers, vegetation and plantation. Um, I was told that there is a way to kind of neutralize a lot of the dust and all the leftover stuff from the mining, but chances are they probably don't have any type of rules or regulation in a lot of these African countries, where typically they'll just be like give the government a bunch of money for the mining rights, and they say, okay, yeah, that's fine, and then they employ people. So the environmental impact is huge. You have the ability to wipe out entire lakes and rivers to make everybody who lives in the surrounding community very sick. It poisons vegetation. I've seen some things in an article that a farmer was watering his farm, and all of the vegetation was dying from the water from the river. And what they had to do to go around that and combat that is dig for wells and use well water to water everything. But how long will that last? Because if it's that far seeped into everything, it's going to move into the groundwater eventually.
So we're talking about strip mining, where the mining itself is actually being done as well, probably with diesel powered heavy equipment as well, right?
Yeah. So gigantic, um, what's it called? Gigantic dump trucks and that
Yeah,
type of
front end
equipment.
loaders and giant earth movers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But that is just one example that I found just dragging around on Google Earth. And that's huge.
And you can see it right there.
Yeah.
So huge concern. And lithium, one of the key elements in these batteries,
Yeah.
for the most part, it's not coming from North America. The battery manufacturing is not happening in North America. It's these
No.
Chinese companies, and we're seeing it. And who has the lithium? Which countries? Afghanistan.
Afghanistan, yeah.
What just happened in Afghanistan?
Well,
The US
Afghanistan just had a very disastrous U.S. military pullout where they basically violated every rule in the book on warfare and retreating. Probably a blunder not seen so badly since 18th century or something like that.
sure makes you wonder what really went on there, because no sooner did the US pull out, China moved in. And it's like they just handed them the lithium, the future of the automotive industry, right?
And meanwhile, our governments, so Canada and United States, are saying, "Well, we will not do business with a Taliban government." And then China goes, "Oh, wow, you know what? We'd love to do business. Here's our card."
And if we're getting all of the lithium, well, all of this is going on, we're shutting down our oil industry.
Yes.
We're rapidly moving toward an all electric automotive future, where the batteries that will be going into them will not be produced here, for the most part.
No. And
I mean, they're scrambling. They say they're building battery facilities here, but really, we know that that's not really true.
yeah, why would they when they could manufacture them for way less? All the labor that goes into making them is going to cost proportionally cheaper in China. So why would they build it here?
And all those minerals, those resources are being mined in other parts of the world. So, China's not going to mine the lithium in Afghanistan, ship it to Canada to produce it. They're going to make the batteries there.
Yeah.
They're going to ship it back to China before they'll ship it to Canada.
Big time. Definitely not the U.S. either. We're not going to see any deals with that. And so there's a lot of questions here that we're never going to hear the answer to. But I still think it's important that we still keep asking these questions, that any type of government push or legislation is always going to have its intended consequences and its unintended consequences. And more often than not, we are failing 80% of the time to ask the questions of, okay, well, those are your intended consequences, but what are going to be the unintended consequences of all of these green energy acts and bills and canceling out gasoline vehicles and that sort of thing. So we need to really start pushing those questions because, like I said, they're not going to care at all when it comes to, is the electric market going to be able to catch up with the gasoline powered market? They're not going to care.
Yeah. And the entire industry, our economy, is about to dramatically be transformed. And if you listen to some of these auto industry executives, the CEO of Toyota said that he doesn't think that we can produce the infrastructure that's really needed to support an all electric future yet. The CEO of Stellantis, which is Chrysler,
Yep,
says that a company like Chrysler could go out of business because the push is happening so quickly that Chrysler might not be able to adapt.
I don't even think that they have a
survive.
fully electric. I don't even think they have a fully electric vehicle on the market yet. They have a hybrid.
Mm-hmm. So, I think we really need to think about this, because if you don't have Chrysler, if General Motors has their Hummer,
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to get their pickup truck to market. Ford seems to be in a very good position overall. They've got the Mach-E, and Chevy does have the Bolt, but they're having production problems with that.
Even Tesla, I think, is having production problems because they tried to come out with the Cybertruck. Everybody remembers the press conference where they smashed the window with the hammer and it broke the glass on the vehicle when Elon Musk did that. That still hasn't hit the market yet. That was years ago, like 2 years ago.
And the truth is, Tesla is as far as I know, and correct me if I'm wrong, somebody out there, but I don't think Tesla is actually the biggest electric car company in the world. If you really check it out, BYD in China is the biggest. And Toyota has partnered with them. Daimler has partnered with BYD. A lot of the auto companies are going to China for some of the technology that they're going to be needing and they're using right now to produce electric vehicles. China. And China is producing electric cars cheaper than we're producing them here.
Forgive me if I'm outspoken here, but if they paired up with Daimler, then it's definitely going to go downhill.
A little bias there.
No, I just remember the Chrysler Daimler days.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's a strong brand. The point is, the Chinese are coming.
Yeah.
And I foresee a repeat of what happened with Japan, and the way Japan moved into the North American market and kind of ate the North American automakers' lunches. They just kicked butt over here, and you're seeing it today. Ford doesn't even produce cars anymore, aside from the Mustang. Trucks and SUVs, and they're leaving the cars to the Japanese companies. Well, they're all world car companies now. Honda produces here, Toyota produces here.
Yeah.
But the point is, I'm not sure our North American auto industry is ready for this. Even the automotive parts, aftermarket parts, you go to get brake rotors for your car, brake pads, exhaust, any front end part, any parts at all. Most of them today are built in China. You think you're driving a Canadian built or a US built car? Think again. The parts that you're putting back on your car to fix your car, it's all coming from China.
Also, manufacturing is quite down too, like North America. So if you were to compare the amount of automotive manufacturing occurring in North America from 20 years ago to today, there's like a huge drop off, including after NAFTA, when most of these car companies, the big three anyway, they all went to Mexico.
Yes.
Where they manufacture.
Yeah. But this is a totally different scenario. China is on the rise.
Yes.
And they're poised to become the world's largest economy. The car companies are focused on China and not just producing cars there, but selling them.
Yeah.
Right. So that the Chinese market is extremely important to all of the car companies right now. I would say more important even than North America. We're not producing as much as we used to here. And with the way that things have happened over the last 2 years with all this COVID stuff, and now the chip shortage and the way it's affected dealerships and car sales, I mean, this is like, these car companies have been hammered, just absolutely hammered. So, and now they have to continue to invest in electric vehicles.
And I guess to add on to the Chinese market, it's going to be a lot like the film and movie market. So China is deciding how how we're consuming media. So you can make a movie and open it for your box offices for 300 and some million people in North America, or you could take that movie and you could throw it in the Chinese market. And so, in order for it to be in the Chinese market, it has to comply with the Communist Party rules and that sort of thing in order for it to go into that market, which is huge, and it vastly outnumbers anything that we put here. So we make movies now for China. We don't make movies for North America anymore. Not that there's anything altogether that wrong with it, but it's kind of weird that there is a semi-censorship on how our movies are being made, or the Chinese Communist Party is going to dictate how we watch movies, which is absurd. It's weird. But the automotive industry is going to do that, where they're going to favor selling vehicles to the gigantic market in China as opposed to selling vehicles for us, and then it'll be kind of an offshoot. I've worked in automotive industry in regards to customer service and stuff like that, and I'll tell you, the goodwill programs offered by the automotive industry in the United States market is huge. And if you compare that to what they offer to Canadians, which is a significantly smaller population, it's astounding. So they prefer the US market over the Canadian market, but they're going to do the same thing with the Chinese market, where they're going to prefer that. We already see that. We already have the foundations for that. So
what do you think is going to happen with all these cars, and especially the batteries? I mean, all this stuff has to be recycled or repurposed in some way. And are we going to end up with giant toxic battery dumps someplace, or is it going to be safe? Or we're going to have like giant, what happens if there's a fire at a battery stockpile and these things explode? Or, not that I'm trying to be negative, but honestly,
that'd be very catastrophic. That'd probably be maybe a similar to like a nuclear dump accident, I would say.
I don't know. I don't know what the level of safety is, or what the protocols are in place to protect people in that regard. But it seems to me these are questions I could have had answers to before we started this broadcast, or maybe somebody out there that has some information they can share with us. But if anyone has any comments, chime in. But I've wondered about this. These lithium battery packs, they have an immense amount of energy stored up in them, probably even after they're decommissioned.
Yeah. Well, and think about we already said the minerals they're made out of. They're made of copper, zinc, cobalt, lithium. All of these components are very heavy metals, and if they are exposed to the environment or left to the environment, you could expect some environmental damage from that, because they will degrade in the elements and that sort of thing. Interestingly enough, I did look up the cost of a 2021 Chevy Volt battery, and it looks like it's like $8,000 or something.
Right. That's right. And that's for a Volt. So, yeah. And that's not like a really high capacity battery, right? So if you were replacing something on a Ford Mach-E or a Tesla, it would be a lot more money, because it's a much higher capacity battery.
I saw for Tesla, I think like $13,000.
Yeah.
Which I could probably buy 5 crappy cars for that.
Yes. So it just puts all of these used vehicles into the category of, middle class, upper middle class people. You have someone working a minimum wage job or a slightly above minimum wage job, or one income families. It becomes more and more difficult for them to afford a used vehicle that's going to be reliable, and it would give them the range that they want. They might get a used electric car, but it might only have 50% of the battery capacity left.
Yeah, especially if it's 5 years. I found it kind of interesting, the the battery warranty for the Chevy Bolt is only 8 years or 160,000 kilometers. Like, these are little old 80s drive into church kind of cars. And I know Tesla is a bit better, where you get up to 700-kilometer range. Like that, you have potential to take some pretty cool road trips with a car like that. And I am very impressed with the progress that Tesla has made. I think that whatever we see out of the electric car industry, I think that we're going to see the most innovation from that. Unfortunately, I think the Democratic Party of the United States does not like Elon Musk, and so I don't think that they'll be looking to subsidize him very much or help him out very much. So I don't think it'll be government sponsored. I think they'll try and go the other way.
It's interesting you would say that. I would disagree. I think he's a rock star, a media rock star, and that company doesn't really make a profit, never really has. It's all being driven, again, by government money. That whole company, from start to finish, it's all government grants, government grants, government grants. It's the government grants that made Elon Musk rich. It's the government grants that propped it up. And then you got the stock market, in there. So people are investing in it heavily, and people have made money in the stock market with the company, but the company itself hasn't really turned a profit. There really aren't any dividends yet. If ever there will be, I just don't see it. But it's a different ball game these days when it comes to the auto industry.
And he has a bad habit of just doing things and then trying to get forgiveness after the fact. So I think that will probably be limited in another way. To kind of go with
the
what
only
you're saying there.
only reason I disagree with you about the Democrats is I just think that these politicians like to latch on to him because of his star power, and they just want to give him money. They want to give him the grants. They want him to come to town, and they want to be seen with him. They want to. It's like when that sort of thing starts, when the politicians start handing out money like that. If Elon Musk wanted to come to our hometown here in Ontario, and if he said, I think I'd like to set up a factory, the politicians would be falling all over themselves to give him as much money as he wants. There's no question in my mind about it, especially the Liberals and then the Democrats. They'd be like, how much do you want? Can we give you 10 times that much? And the media would fawn over Elon, and they would just assume that this thing would be a monumental success.
Well, we'll have to see. I don't think that Canada would show much love for him, but we could agree to disagree for sure. But you're right. He is quite subsidized. I did do a quick search here, and a Los Angeles Times analysis estimated in 2015, Tesla received $4.9 billion in government support, bolstered in part by incentives for hybrid and electric cars that were passed after the 2008 recession.
Yeah.
$4.9 billion
in tax money. And I guarantee you there were a lot of Democrats involved in that, and Republicans.
Yeah, they could have funded a whole new Iraq war with that.
Yeah, well, that's a whole other ball of wax. All the auto companies, though, are being subsidized, and they're all being incentivized to adopt these green policies, or more specifically, electric vehicle policies and programs. Governments want these companies producing electric vehicles. They're going to make it happen, whether we like it or not. We are going to get electric cars. Simple as that.
Do you think regular people are actually, on average, quite empathetic towards Greta Thunberg and her "How dare you" speech? Like, do you think people really care about that, or do you think they just use her as the face of a movement?
I think that there's a pretty clear dividing line politically. So It depends on which side of the line the people are on, whether they embrace that or not.
I'm not sure, but I mean, most people seem to that I know are just always like, well,
I think that you have, the people on the one side who are skeptical of all this. And when they go
yeah,
to buy a car, they're going to buy a gasoline powered car. And then you have the people on the other side who strangely will say that they believe in electric vehicles, and they probably have a poster of Greta on their bedroom wall, right? Idolizing her. And yet when the time comes for them to go and put the money down on a new lease or a new vehicle purchase, they end up buying a gasoline powered car as well, because they really do the analysis, look at how it impacts them personally, see how the numbers play out for them personally, and realize that for them, a gasoline powered car today, right now, still makes more sense than an electric vehicle. So that's why you still have 95% of the people buying a gasoline powered car. That's changing a bit, especially with all the government subsidies in place. But even with that dividing line, when it comes right down to it, when it comes time for somebody to put down their money, it's a different story than it is when they're voting to spend other taxpayers' dollars, right, to fund these programs or initiatives or social movements or social engineering movements or environmental movements or whatever it might be.
One of the biggest conspiracies that I've ever heard is, I don't really know enough about it, but I've always heard a whole group of people that always go to, oh, we've had non-gasoline powered cars since the dawn of time, which one of the first cars ever made was battery powered, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then we also had the Chrysler turbine, which could be powered off of, I think, everything from basically products with high alcohol content in it, so tequila.
That's true. Yeah.
Perfumes. I think they drove it around in France, and they used Chanel perfume to power the turbine.
It's true story. I've seen the turbine car powered up being driven a couple of times. I've seen them at concours events, and yeah, they're cool.
They are very cool looking. That car looks more futuristic than any of the cars that we have today. But my point being that people seem to think that there is a conspiracy theory to keep the oil and gas companies rich and to keep these cars out of the market. But it's kind of funny that it seems like on a dime, we are seeing the opposite out of nowhere. So I think those people are probably scrambling a little bit. But we've all heard this before at some point. So I kind of wanted to know, like, what your thoughts are. So do you think that there is something that should be said about that? It's just kind of weird that we've always said, oh, we've been keeping the electric car down for years, but now we are kind of over propping it.
No, I've never really bought into that idea that there's a conspiracy afoot to just keep the oil companies rich, that some guy invented a carburetor that got 1,000 miles to the gallon and they killed him, and then buried his body in a cement tomb underneath an overpass next to Jimmy Hoffa because.
So you've heard that one then?
Oh yeah, I've never really bought into that.
Yeah,
I think that the use of gasoline and oil has been a matter of practicality. It's been a pretty efficient method of powering things.
Yeah.
How much impact has it had on the environment? That's also, I think, open for debate. Other people would say the science is settled. I'm not so sure. I think a lot of this is political, and I think a lot of it is driven by economics and outside political forces and marketing campaigns disguised as social movements.
Yeah, and I mean, that goes back to what we were saying, like, about Greta, or what I was saying about Greta. Like, they take the face of a child and they smear it across billboards and television screens, and I'm really concerned when the media and organizations propagate something and they use emotional draw. As soon as I see them trying to toy on your emotions, where they go, "Well, how dare you?" It's like, okay, well, first off, like, what are you getting at here? Because once you start trying to use my emotions, my critical thinking brain kicks into overdrive and says, "You want something here? Like, there's something weird about this."
Yes. Well, if you look back through time, from the dawn of from the birth of the automobile, governments have always had their fingers into it,
Yeah.
and they've always tried to impose regulations. You go back over 100 years, and governments around the world, where cars have been produced and driven, they've they always were predicting the end of the oil supply, environmental disaster. None of these things have ever really truly come to pass. And some of the
No.
regulations they passed over time, like in England, they had regulations about the length of the stroke of the piston, and the car companies had to do crazy things that made them less competitive worldwide to comply with these regulations that were supposed to help the environment. And really, all they did in the end was cripple the English car companies. So I just don't buy into a lot of this stuff. I still think that oil is especially Canadian oil, it's extracted ethically in an environmentally responsible manner. The internal combustion engine is at the top of its game. It burns fuel very efficiently.
Very efficiently, yeah. And it has the ability to be even more efficient.
Yes, that's true. And I have to laugh. I do laugh when I see, and I don't mean to pick on GM, because the new Hummer is actually pretty darn cool. Okay. Especially with the crab walker and all that, and the sideway movement, the engineering that's gone into these cars has been incredible. But
Yeah.
I laugh because if we're trying to save the environment, why are car companies producing electric vehicles that are humongous and have like 1,000 horsepower and go from 0 to 100 in 1.2 seconds? They're not necessarily energy efficient in that regard. And
that's not even a money-making market at this point in time. Like, that's like what, the top 30% of the market that could afford that, if they even want it.
Yeah, it's like your Nissan Leaf, your Chevy Bolt, electric cars, like even Hyundai. They have cars coming on the market that I think are more viable, more practical. But I just laugh because it's like, here we are. Why are we switching to electric vehicles? Because we're trying to save the planet. And then what do we produce? It's like giant super trucks that get 2 miles to a charge because there's enough battery capacity to power New York City for a week. It's
did you hear any what type of range you would expect on said Hummer?
Oh, I can't remember, but it was impressive. I'll look it up here. I think it's hundreds of kilometers. It's probably about 350, 400.
Yeah. If the Bolt could get 400, just over 400.
So the electric Hummer, 329 miles. Yeah.
Okay, so that's probably around like 500 kilometers or so.
Not smart enough to do it in my head, but that's 529 kilometers.
Close enough.
So, I mean, that's pretty impressive. It
is
truly
pretty impressive.
Yeah. But that's
Especially
a big vehicle, and they have a lot of space for a big battery pack, right?
Yeah, and then if you want to talk, like, you got your infotainment system for the kids in the back and that sort of stuff, like, that's just all going to drain it, like, real quick.
And well, you have the Ford Lightning pickup, right? Where you can use those Ford the battery packs on the Ford F-150s to power your house, and people did, with the hybrids and all of that. And when they had the power outage down in Texas, people were doing things like that with those pickups. Pretty impressive stuff.
That is impressive, and I think that those things have the ability to thrive in the market.
And I will say this. I mean, I think Ford will survive because I think they're a great company, well positioned. They've got great engineers. I think GM will survive because they're a company right now run by engineers. They'll figure out their problems. They'll get there. Companies like Chrysler, maybe not. The auto industry in North America, I don't know. Like I think Ford and GM might shift their production overseas, but
I do know that at some point Chrysler had, and this was always public knowledge, that Chrysler made a Cherokee factory for the Chinese market in China. So I don't know what their connections are going to be with that market, but I think that the Chrysler has struggled a lot since its previous CEO died. His name escapes me because we're
Sergio
Marchionne. Yeah.
Yes. So I guess the question is, Brenden, what do you think? Are electric vehicles really a viable pathway to the future, especially when you consider if we're looking at this from an environmental perspective? Is this the answer?
It very well could be. There's leaps and bounds that's going to be needed in regards to a practical application. No. So including the environmental impact that it's going to have, as well as the impractical applications that's going to have, everything from needing to charge your vehicle for an hour while you're on a road trip and trying to get somewhere, to not being able to afford parts, batteries, and that sort of thing. We have a long way to go. And the better thing to do here would be to just let the market decide what's better.
Do you think that that's realistic, though? I mean, I think that people on the other side of the argument would say that if we don't incentivize this and maybe even penalize the gasoline side of the equation, we'll never get there. And we won't get there fast enough if you believe Greta, who thinks that the Earth will, come to a boiling end in about 8 years or whatever it is.
Well, I highly doubt a plastic bag is going to kill the Earth. So I would also say the same. I highly doubt fossil fuel usage will too. We have all I really want here is I don't want my tax dollars going towards making this business bigger. I just want the market to decide, and we have much better opportunity to create jobs by keeping that market and keep letting it decide. Like it's going to be the best situation for everybody in the long run, and that when you leave the market to do these things, then people are going to throw ingenuity at things, and they're going to make things better. And that's how we're going to get things that are going to be more viable for everyone. But we can't. I would never in a million years trust something that with this much propaganda thrown behind it and this much government money.
Well, when Cortez reached the New World, he burned his ships. So it seems to me the politicians are taking a similar approach to electric vehicles at this point. They're all in. They're not going to turn back. It's like they're going to set these gasoline-powered cars on fire like Cortez did to his ships in 2035, if not sooner, to force people to adapt and adopt electric vehicles. So I guess we better learn to live with it somehow and make it work.
Yeah. So well, we'll see. Time will tell. I'll keep complaining about it for the meantime, though.
Yeah. And in the meantime, I think we'll get to see the development of some pretty cool technology.
Yeah.
We'll get to drive some pretty cool cars with some pretty impressive performance.
I think that's one thing that'll remain the same, no matter where the market goes. Even if the government pays for it, we're still going to see leaps and bounds. I think I might be cautiously optimistic, I guess you could say, but I do really enjoy the tech that's been coming out, and I do get excited when you see electric vehicle with like a 700 plus kilometer range like that. That's to be applauded, and that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. Well, we've been pretty negative overall about all this. I'm kind of surprised to hear you say that you're optimistic.
I am optimistic because the market at the end of the day will decide. Even if the government does overimpose its will on people, people are going to pay for what they want to pay for. So if they can make it work, then by all means. But there has to be a tool in the toolbox that's going to fit everybody's needs. Otherwise, there's going to be trouble.
So if we can't build the infrastructure, if there's a link in the chain that isn't going to work, and it's not just not going to work, what you're saying is government won't have any choice at that point. They'll have to allow us to continue to keep driving gasoline-powered vehicles and extend this out over a longer period of time.
Well, if they don't, then there'll be
we're going to be stranded.
There'll be disruptions in the workplaces. So I say like people who need a vehicle that's going to tow their motorhome and all their ATVs and stuff like that, which sure you could do that, but but there's going to be a lot of people that'll be left behind by that, and those are going to be people who live in rural areas, and it's all going to be designed for the major cities. It'll all work really well there, but we're going to leave a whole bunch of people behind if that's the case. So there's two sides to this coin, and I think ultimately the market will end up deciding in one way or another. So the pendulum always swings. The pendulum was one way for a long time, and now it's going the other way. So we'll see what happens. Like, we can't lose all hope.
Well, okay. What would be your final words to the politicians out there?
I don't think I'd be allowed to say it on the podcast.
Well, give us a light version. What's your advice to them as they continue to push us toward an electrified future?
Think about the unintended consequences of everything that you were doing. Think about where the money for everything is going to be going. Think about a large percentage of people who are not going to listen to propaganda or be overimposed with your will. Like, that would be my number one thing. Like, I'm tired of an over incentivized government or overpaid government officials telling everybody what to do. And more often than not, it's always going to be rules for us and different rules for them. So we need to think about unintended consequences here, and we need to think about where we're going, because you may say this ultra green utopian future is going to be the best for everybody, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah, I would agree. I think caution is warranted here. There's so many jobs on the line. The future of the country, the economy here, so much of it depends on the auto industry. And
many nations, many countries.
Yes.
Mexico included.
Yep.
United States too.
Yes. So the auto industry in Canada has already taken taken some heavy hits over the past 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
And I think if they aren't careful, they could kill the golden goose.
Yeah. We definitely need the ability for people to pursue life, liberty, and happiness. We don't have good jobs for people. There goes that out the window.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Brenden, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And before we wrap up, is there anything that you'd like to add or think that we might be missing, or if we covered all the bases for this evening?
We have covered all the bases. I wanted to thank you so much for your time. I absolutely enjoyed talking. And to everybody else out there, feel free to look us up on Spotify or on Facebook, The Flow of Discourse, and be more than happy to have anybody who wants to listen in on any of those conversations.
Okay, well, I hope that they do tune you in, and you'll be back on this program again, because I think that you add a lot. You have a lot of valuable insight and things to share. And even though when we're incredibly negative, you still leave us all with a dose of positivity at the end, which is a good thing.
I try.
Well, there you have it, folks. That's it for this edition of SST Live. So until next time, I'm Rick Walker, reminding you, when you can't get to the car show, we will bring the car show to you online at sstcarshow.com.